Okay, now I'm going to try this thing out. Yes, excellent. So, what are your thoughts when you see this image? Freedom, exploration, self-sufficiency.
Journey.
A journey, sure.
Mid-journey, AI generated.
It might very well be. It's also Adobe stock photo, but let's not focus on the not important details. We will get back to this image in a while, so just keep it in mind, okay? It's going to make sense. I promise it's going to make sense. But I mean, of course, this talk is not about cowboys. It's about cybersecurity regulations and software services and business continuity and risk management. In short, it's about what you should and what you shouldn't do. And that regulations are coming to help give your management team and board extra incentives to care. Let's put it that way. Regulation is coming because we as a society have perhaps been a bit happier about getting the benefits of digitalization than we have been about paying the costs for implementing information security. So, what are we up against? Oh, that's a weird looking emoji, sorry about that. That's PowerPoint rendering that. So what are we up against? Well, it all comes down to two categories of reasons. First, a lack of funds, and a lack of knowledge. Investing in security, and by that I mean properly, is hard to convince company boards to do because the benefits are far too vague compared to investing in, a new feature or business development. So targeting a new market, signing 10 new customers, whatever it might be, developing a new great feature for a product, that's of course always going to be very interesting. They bring benefits that are much clearer to see. So perhaps that's, and also maybe you haven't even had an incident, or you had one a long time ago, and couldn't we even spend a bit less on information security and cybersecurity? We haven't seen any incidents lately? I don't know. Sadly, many people reason like this. But then there's also the knowledge gap. So information and cybersecurity are both difficult fields, They require constantly evolving expert knowledge in a field that will always be to the attacker's advantage rather than the defender's, because basically you need to defend against every single security vector there is, so against all possible attacks, but the attacker just needs to find the one that you forgot. So it will always be to their advantage, and now they have AI as well to help them out. So the question is then, what can we do about all this? But first, now that I hope that I have your attention, hi, my name is Lars Larsson, and I'm the field CTO of Elastisys, a company that provides secure cloud application platforms. So why am I qualified to talk about this stuff? And what is my perspective and what's my background? So first of all, we have a lot of customers out here. A lot of them have booths as well. And they can deploy application on a platform, and we have security in depth, just like the last speaker also talked about, but perhaps in a different way because we're not Philips-sized. I believe that I know what I'm talking about because on behalf of customers, we've managed tens of millions of server hours of platform operations. We haven't had a security breach. Me personally, I've been in cloud computing since basically it started, and I've studied how it works inside and out, and I somehow managed to get a PhD in the process as well. So my perspective in all this is that of the engineer, that of the computer scientist, of the technical person. A tool maker, basically. Well, that's pretty much what I am now. There's an interesting quote about tools, actually, from Abraham Lincoln, and it goes like this. Give me 6 hours to chop down a tree, and I will spend the first 4 hours sharpening the axe. Have you heard that one? So, this quote is often used to show what a wise person he was, and that he understood the value of good tools. But I have to disagree to some extent, because if you're the kind of person who chops down trees, shouldn't your axe always be sharp? I think it should be. And is it really time to start sharpening that axe when the occasion to use it rises. So, by show of hands, please, who here thinks that cyber attacks are the most common cause of security incidents? One person. Cool. That one person is, these days, right. Everybody else is wrong. But you were right before. So, the MSB, the Swedish Civil Contingencies Agency, has now seen that cyber attacks have risen to number one reason. Have you any idea what was the number one before? Human error, basically. Misconfiguration, using the tools wrong, essentially. So basically people that haven't had their axe sharpened. And add the fact that, and so the problem is that cybersecurity attacks have only managed to take the number one spot because they are now more frequent. It's not that the other stuff is gone as a problem. So what all this is saying is, this is not the time to have a dull axe that needs sharpening. You shouldn't have to sharpen it for 4 hours because the attackers have done all kinds of damage if you do. So, on that topic, digital society needs digital security. And regulations are good for us. I mean, we just heard about MDR. That's great if you're a patient, you want your device that does medical stuff to be safe. But also think traffic safety laws. I mean, it's interesting that we as a society think it's a good idea to sit in a car and meet another car like 1 or 2 meters away going at 180 kilometers per hour, you know, towards each other, separated only by like 1 or 2 meters of distance. And the reason that we can even do that is because we basically have a whole lot of trust in traffic safety laws. And digital services, they need to earn that level of trust too. EU-wide cybersecurity legislation is being put in place with the goals of harmonizing national cybersecurity capabilities to ensure cross-border collaboration and to have instituted supervision of critical sectors across the EU. And that's what NIS2 is all about. Now, you might be thinking that the 2 is a bit strange. It implies there was a 1 at some point. Sure. The original NIS was from 2016. It certainly existed. It already applied to health providers. So many of you are probably under it right now. There have been changes though, and let's look at what NIS2 brings. So in essence, you can summarize NIS2 as being about risk management, corporate accountability, business continuity, and new reporting obligations. And the best thing about this slide is that all of these, well, perhaps besides the reporting one, are topics that the most senior of management types really have to worry about. Business continuity, for instance, that's their problem. And whenever I talk to CEOs about this type of thing, this is what they really have to worry about. And NIS2 also means that serious incidents can lead to liabilities and penalties for management. So they are about to start caring, I'm sure. We will soon see that NIS2 expands its scope to cover more of the digital society that we really have. More of society, more industry sectors, they're going to be covered. EU member states have to put national cybersecurity strategy in place, and they have to define so-called CSIRTs, so as to give an answer to the classic, Ghostbuster question, who are you going to call? Well, these people. Failure to comply with NIS2 can be very, very costly. We're talking 10 million euros or 2% of annual global turnover, whichever is greater. The EU says NIS2 is supposed to be enforced from October 18th, but Sweden will not be able to do that. We will, at the earliest, have a law in place, a national law, like a version of it, January 1st next year. So we will be a bit late. That's sort of how our system works here. We can't have new laws whenever we want. It's just twice a year. We haven't been the fastest at figuring out all this stuff yet, and it's not entirely sure exactly how it's going to look, but according to the Statens offentliga utredningar, so some pre-step to a law basically, as of March this year, we will probably get something called cybersecurity, and it will actually be a combination of NIS2 and the also related Critical Entities Resilience Act. So the question of the exact dates aside, note that I only talked about Sweden here. The time is now to start preparing for the changes that are coming. So first of all, scope expansion. You're here at Vitalis, so you of course care about like an e-health software as a service if you came to this talk, and thank you to everybody that came to this talk. So which one are you? Are you going to be covered by this? Well, let's see. Well, health is of course rather obvious. Most of you fall into that category already, I suppose. Digital providers and digital service providers from the old NIS. That's very likely that we have some of them here in the audience too. And that can include search engines, say that you link externally to certain kinds of providers or treatments or health information. Online marketplaces, perhaps you like matching providers, patients, other stakeholders somehow. Then you're an online marketplace possibly. For all I know, some of you could of course also be in, research or chemicals manufacturing as well, because not everybody here is in software only. I mean, how many of you have not been in the super nice massage chairs and stuff like that? So this is a pretty broad conference in that regard. Incident reporting wise, so you have new obligations. Under NIS1, you already had to do this. But given that it wasn't really all that much enforced, basically nobody did this, or far too few did anyway. So again, the Swedish MSB, the ones that should be getting these reports, in the previous years, they only had like 100 or 200 reported incidents per year for all of Sweden. Is that a reasonable number? Do you think that's plausible? No, not at all. So that has to be off by orders of magnitude, possibly tens or hundreds of times larger in reality. And that's all going to be much clearer, and we will also have a pace increase. So you now have to do an initial warning within 24 hours of you finding out that you are having an incident. An incident notification has to be sent out within 72 hours, that includes more information, and an assessment of the severity and impact, and indicators of the incident. So why did you have an incident? And finally then, a report within a month's time that has all the details. So a detailed description of the incident, including severity and impact, the type of threat or root cause that is likely to have triggered it, what you did to mitigate it, and where applicable, if there's anything like cross-border incident, if there's something that has like a cross-border impact of this incident. And sharing this is great for society because it allows us all to get better at cybersecurity. However, it also means that you have to have the capability to produce that type of information. You need to understand how to do this type of root cause analysis if you offer this type of system, or you need to depend on serious vendors that can, of course. Now, on the positive side, keep in mind that this is a two-way street. You will also get some benefit from this information being shared, which is good. We're all in this together. Whereas others have put it, we're not supposed to compete on cybersecurity, which I think is very good and reasonable. It shouldn't be like you go, haha, you got hacked. No, that's not great. We don't want that. We want everything to be safe. So, risk management and business continuity-wise. So you must reduce the risk of cybersecurity incidents, and that's what risk management is, and you have to plan for what you're supposed to do when they actually do occur, and that's business continuity. NIS2 has 9 non-prescriptive requirements regarding cybersecurity, and 1 prescriptive. The first of the non-prescriptive ones is actually about risk management, so we can just dive in. So, NIS2 can't really come out and just say, do ISO 27001, because I mean, it would be weird. It's a specific standard by a company, it's being sold for money. But in practice, it kind of does go as far as calling out ISO 27001 and 2. And the burden of proof is on you if you choose something else. And that's good. As for the rest of this slide, none of this is a surprise either, I suppose. You know you're supposed to do stuff like network security and manage backups, and you might even be claiming to do so already. We also know that even something as obvious as taking backups and actually practicing disaster recovery is something most companies don't do sufficiently well or often. Because maybe they did it like once 3 years ago, and maybe if you're lucky, the people that worked back then are still at the company now. But if the exact same procedures are in place, you wouldn't really know. You have to practice these things. And I mean, we as platform vendors, we are obsessed with this stuff. This is what we do. This is our bread and butter. But I have full empathy if this is not what you want to spend a ton of time on. I understand if it hasn't been a priority. So, supply chain security. This is going to be big. So some have also heard that, well, you have to be over a certain size for NIS2 to apply to you. Correct. However, you also have to, so the ones that it does apply to, they have to, it applies to everybody in their supply chain as well. So then you have to worry about supply chain security, and that's something that is just a huge field these days. Let me tell you a story. So I am very much into security. I'm a security nerd. And our security nerd community had a rude awakening during Easter this year. It was interesting. We learned that a hacker had spent 2 years infiltrating a small open source project. And this open source project was used commonly by server administrators when they log in from one system to the next. So, as part of a big program, there was this one small project that did a specific task, and that was in the thing that lets server administrators log in from one system to the next, right? And hackers had managed to sneak in a backdoor into this thing. It's a small project. It was maintained by basically just one person. This person had health issues. His project was targeted by this hacker for 2 years, where they provided help, and the community was just shocked. We knew this could happen, but we did not really know that people would endure for 2 years as they tried to plan something like this. So we all learned that this is the reality of supply chain security these days. And we know that far too many depend on the work of far too few. So let's turn it back to you. Can you even list the exact versions of every single piece of software, of every single component that runs in your system or in your platform? Can you give me day-fresh numbers about which known vulnerabilities are in your software? Not a single hand is going up. Maybe I didn't ask for it, but yeah. Well, you should be able to, because it's going to be the law. And if organizations could get away with not taking this very seriously before, perhaps the fact that management will, on an individual level now, become liable and have penalties levied against them, that might make things change. The list items here all help establish basically a cybersecurity baseline. If you're in this field that I am, it looks pretty basic, but you can recall both the graph that I showed in the beginning of the talk and the cowboy picture. Because this list of security best practices looks simple enough, none of them are really a given. As a society, we've just kind of rushed into digitalization without taking information security as seriously. So here's the thing. Change is needed. We need to be able to depend on our digital society, just like we depend on the physical one. But change is also coming. We're getting more and more regulations that will provide the driving force so that we can become the digital society that we are and that we need to be. So now we have to ask you, do you remember that cowboy picture? That's what I would say that our digitalization journey has looked like so far. Everyone has just been trying to figure it all out as they go along. Every problem gets a custom solution, there's no real safety, there's no regulation, no baseline. You don't even know if you have food to eat tomorrow. I mean, the cowboy didn't really look like he knew where he'd eat tomorrow. And that may look attractive to some, but it also means that you're not going to be able to get the benefits of functioning society either. So the times of the cowboy and Wild West are over. We're at the point where the Wild West has been explored and it's been settled, and this is what Los Angeles looks like today. It used to be a desert, and now it's a place where people can actually thrive. That happens when we don't need to worry about the basics any longer. That's when we can take society to the next level. To build greatness, you have to build it on a solid foundation. So, we're all here in beautiful Gothenburg today, in a massive building. Also, we're inside even though the weather is beautiful. I'm certain no one in this audience would be able to build this building or cater food or drinks or any of the other logistics required for this event. But we can all benefit from it, and we don't have to worry about a single thing. Regulations around food, water, ventilation safety, and building codes and all that stuff is about making these spaces safe and so that we are all taken care of. We do not need to think about our survival. We can assume a working baseline so that we can meet during these days and figure out how our businesses and ideas can thrive. And thriving is never thanks to intense and stubborn self-sufficiency, but via well understood, well-defined collaboration, keeping each other safe. Experts doing what they do best in their specific fields so that all of society benefits. And if you want to be part of that, you have to learn how to comply with the regulations. Just like whoever built, that bridge in the picture. You can't just wing that bridge. You have to make sure it's safe. Otherwise, what's happening to all those cars? So what's your next step when you leave this room? Well, besides lunch. You're supposed to read the NIS2 implementation in your EU member state. Not everybody is from Sweden, I know. In Sweden, it will be called cybersecurity. I'm very confident. So you should do that. Read up on it. Number 2, beef up your security posture and basic hygiene with that. Implement and get certified for ISO 27001 now. Start today. And only depend on vendors that have that certification, because that of course means that you have much less of a burden to get certified. Your very next step could be a physical one. Please come over to our booth. We have a booth here at Vitalis, B03:01. We can discuss how we can do stuff together. We have also written 2 more in-depth articles that you can read. You can find them online. So either do a web search for us and NIS2, and you can find them, or you can take a picture of those QR codes, and they're supposed to help you come to the articles. So, I am available to take questions now, if there are any.